Let's turn tonight to Psalm number 144. Psalm 144. Begin reading at verse 1. Blessed be the Lord my strength, which teaches my hands to war, and my fingers to fight. My goodness and my fortress, my high tower and my deliverer, my shield and he in whom I trust, who subdues my people under me. Lord, what is man that thou takest knowledge of him? Or the Son of Man, that thou makest account of him? Man is like to vanity. His days are as a shadow that passes away. Bow thy heavens, O Lord, and come down. Touch the mountains, and they shall smoke. Cast forth thy lightning, and scatter them. Shoot out thine arrows, and destroy them. Send thine hand from above. Rid me and deliver me out of great waters, from the hand of strange children, whose mouth speaketh vanity, and their right hand is a right hand of falsehood. I will sing a new song unto thee, O God. Upon a psaltery and an instrument of 10 strings will I sing praises unto thee. It is he that gives salvation unto kings, who delivers David his servant from the hurtful sword. Rid me and deliver me from the hand of strange children, whose mouth speaketh vanity, and their right hand is a right hand of falsehood. That our sons may be as plants grown up in their youth, and that our daughters may be as cornerstones polished after the similitude of a palace. That our garners may be full, affording all manner of store, that our sheep may bring forth thousands and 10,000s in our streets, that our oxen may be strong to labor, that there be no breaking in nor going out, that there be no complaining in our streets. Happy is that people that is in such a case. Yea, happy is that people whose God is the Lord. Amen. This psalm, we were reading it this week, and it kind of caught our attention. Certainly David says many things here. We want to look at a little bit of what he says. He says, blessed be the Lord my strength. Certainly that's what makes us strong. In your life, you might meet some people that you think they are really a strong individual. But you know, if a person's just strong in themselves, they could very easily break. They could very easily discover at some point that they have not the strength that they need. But we think about it, the Lord is our strength. That's what makes us strong. That what makes us able to bear the things that life brings. That's what helps us to go through the difficult places that come in life. And we have this confidence in every life there will be some difficult places. Now what's difficult for one may not be the same for another. Sometimes people's difficulties are hard to see. They're, you might say, internal. They're maybe in the mind, maybe in the heart. But whatever we face, God is the source of our strength. He says, which teaches my hands to war and my fingers to fight. You know, He's our teacher. He's the one that helps us to know how to confront the things that come against us. He's the one that helps us how to know how to overcome things that would cast us down or destroy us. And so He teaches us how to fight our battles. He teaches us how to come through the battles with the victory. You know, if you think about David, he talks about the Lord teaching him how to fight. And he certainly fought some very real battles. But you know, sometimes the way he won the battle wasn't by fighting. The Lord taught him sometimes just to sit still and wait. And he sat still and waited, and God won the battle for him. All he had to do was just keep his trust in God. He said, He is my goodness. And certainly if there's goodness about us, that's where it comes from. Jesus said to that rich young fellow that came to him, He says, there's none good but God. And so we know that He is our goodness. He says He's my fortress and my high tower. He's our place where we can go and have a defense. Have something that will keep the enemy away. You think about it, you go into a fortress, that's what a fortress does for you. It keeps the enemy away. The enemy has to stay there on the outside until somehow the fortress is broken down, or somehow we know that the people inside run out of resources. Well, we know that we're not going to run out of resources with Christ. And certainly the wall He puts around His people, the enemy can't break it down. He's our high tower where we can go and draw close, and we can see those things that we need to see as we go about life. He says He's my deliverer. He delivers us from the things that come against us. He delivers us from the things that would bind us. He's our deliverance. And we know that we ought to appreciate the fact that we have been delivered from the power of sin, that we might live for God and serve Him. He said He's my shield. And so He's our defense. It says, and He in whom I trust. Certainly, He's the one we're counting on. We think about that song the choir just sang, trusting Him, and that's it. That's it. Certainly, that's what we want to do, is just keep our trust and confidence in Him. He says, He is the one who subdues my people under me. Now we think about it, for a king, that's a pretty wonderful thing. For a king, that's a pretty wonderful thing. Men many times get into high office, and you know they might be there by a substantial majority choosing them to be there, but you don't have to mess up too many times till you don't have a substantial majority anymore. It's very easy for people to turn against you and rise up and to cause all kinds of trouble. But we think about it, David said, God's the one that subdues the people under me. God's the one that can bring peace in the land. Certainly if people would turn to God, we believe that we could live in a country where it's peaceable, where people get along, where things can move forward without having to have all the disruption and protesting and things that go on. God is able to subdue people when they'll take heed to Him. Certainly if a man was to rule a country, that's what he needs. And we think about it, it would be good if we had rulers seeking office that understood that concept, that for me to be able to rule the land, I'm going to have God's help to do it. In verse 3 it says this, Lord, what is man that Thou takest knowledge of him? Or the Son of Man that Thou makest account of him? You know, that's a thing to consider. What is man that the Lord would take knowledge of him? We think about it. Many times you can go through life and you know, and not be very well known. You could walk the streets and most people would just say, well, there goes someone, and not take note of you at all. But he says, Lord, what is man that you take knowledge of us? You get to know about us. You find out things about us. And the reality is that God not only takes knowledge of us, He has knowledge of us that we don't have of ourselves. Jesus told them there in that one place, He says, every hair of your head is numbered. God knows how many. I don't know how much hair I got on my head. Not as much as I used to have. But I don't have accounts. I can't keep track. But God takes knowledge of us. He knows. He knows what our struggles are. He knows what our limitations are. He knows what we understand. He knows many things about us, and it's something that God would take the time to get to know us. The world, we think about it, there's a lot of people, they don't have time to get to know us. We don't have time to get to know them. But God takes knowledge of us. And He goes on to say this, and the Son of Man, that thou makest account of Him. We thought on that thought, and God takes account of us. One of the interesting things about it is God, if we could put it this way, God has a big recorder, and He's recording all your life. Now, to kind of put that in perspective, as parents, you periodically maybe whip out your phone and record a little snippet. God's recording everything. He hears the words, He sees the expressions. God is making an account of us. He observes us. And one of the things we need to realize about that, God makes account, and we're glad He records the good. But equally so, we need to be aware that God takes note of everything. We think about the words of Christ in Matthew, in the 12th chapter. He said to the people, He says, but I say unto you that every idle word that men shall speak, they shall give an account thereof in the day of judgment. God keeps a good record. And God keeps a good record. When He talks about idle words, we think about where you're just, talking about the weather, just making conversation, just passing the time, things that you probably can't remember 30 minutes later. God has an account of it. And if there were things said and done there that were unacceptable, God has an account of it. We need to see that where God is concerned, He's very much involved in everything that goes on in our life. He said in Romans the 14th chapter, it said it this way. It says, so then every one of us shall give account of himself to God. So God is keeping a record. Now that record does not have to be a fearful thing if we've settled the account. If we've gone to God and we acknowledged the things that we have done in life that are wrong, and we have repented of them and sought His forgiveness, the Word tells us that part of the account will be taken away, that it'll be erased, that it will no longer be there. But certainly, we should live our lives here as one that God is watching over us at all times. As the children used to sing, there's an all-seeing eye. God certainly does make an account of us. He takes note He sees all that we do. The wonder of it is, he says, man is like to vanity. His days are as a shadow that passes away. Something so insignificant and something so temporary as we are, God still sees fit to take note of our life down here. Now we know it's not insignificant that he does that. Certainly it's greatly significant when we think about the fact that our eternal destiny is decided by this time that are as a shadow that passes away. So we're thankful that God does take note of us, but we want to live so that we will be ready to meet him when we see him face to face. He says, bow your heavens, O Lord, and come down, touch the mountains, and they'll smoke. Cast forth lightning and scatter them. Shoot out your arrows and destroy them. Certainly, you compare that to the insignificance of man, the might and the power and the greatness of God is really beyond comprehension on our part. But he's able to do anything that he would choose to do in this world. He can move mountains. He can pick them up and put them in the sea. He can destroy them. He can cause them to smoke. He can cause them to quake. That's the wonder of God and who he is. And as he observes the greatness of God, he says this, he says, send thine hand from above, rid me and deliver me out of the great waters, from the hand of strange children, whose mouth speaks vanity, and their right hand is the right hand of falsehood. So he's observing the great power of God, and he says, God, rid me. As king, he didn't want everything in his kingdom. He said, rid me, deliver me out of great waters. And we think about the great waters, he's talking about peoples, nations. He says, from the hand of strange children, whose mouth speaks vanity, and their right hand is the right hand of falsehood. You know, when you get in a high place, there's a lot of people who want to be your friend, so to speak. Except they're really not your friend. They just want what you have to offer. And so here he was, he encountered people that would speak flattery, so to speak those things that would make it sound like that they were with him or for him. And their right hand, you know, we think of that right hand, there's a couple of things that are contained in that thought. You know, in one place we read how they extended the right hand of fellowship. And so he's talking about a people that would seemingly reach out to you, but it's a hand of falsehood. They extend the hand of fellowship, but there's no fellowship. And there's no connection. And so that's one thought. And then the other thought is, you know, some people, when they swear, they put up their right hand. And they might swear, but they don't mean it or keep it. Certainly, he said, rid me of that kind of people. He really didn't want that kind of thing going on in his kingdom as a king. And so he said, God, send your hand from above and rid me of this. You intervene in this case. And you know, when we're encountering evil and we're encountering those that might not be what they claim to be and other things, really, God's hand's the one we want to count on. And God, if we have those that are oppressing or opposing or bringing destruction upon us, God's hand is able to rid us of that and to deliver us from it. So we still want to keep our trust in God, because while we are weak, and many times, the longer I go in life, the more I discover many times we are unable for the things that we face. But that when we say we are unable in our own strength for the things that we face. But that doesn't mean we can't come through them. But we need to come through by trusting in God and counting on Him. And it's sometimes difficult if we're going in our own human abilities to do that. But if we've truly put our trust in God, we ought to be able just to take the matter to God and say, God, here it is. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to do it. I don't seem to be able to do it. You help me out. And I believe that's what David was saying here. Lord, by your hand, help me out with all of these things. And he says, I will sing a new song unto thee, O God. Upon a psaltery and an instrument of 10 strings will I sing praise unto thee. It is he that gives salvation unto kings, who delivers David his servant from the hurtful sword. So he says, I'm going to sing a song. And the song I'm going to sing is that God saves kings. God delivers David from the hurtful sword. And we ought to be able to sing that song too. God saves kings. You say, well, I'm a peasant. Well, God makes us kings when we turn to Him through Jesus Christ. And so God saves kings. Those that men might look on and think, well, they're plenty strong to do things by themselves. No, God saves them too. You go read through history. There's plenty of kings that were destroyed by court intrigues and various things. David needed God to save him. Certainly he had some things come against him. And we know some of the things that came against him was because of his sin. But even in those, God ultimately delivered him. He brought him out of it. And so he wanted to sing that song, God saves kings. He delivered me from the hurtful sword. Verse 11, he kind of brings the thought back again. He says, rid me and deliver me from the hand of strange children, whose mouth speaks vanity, and their right hand is the right hand of falsehood. But this time he lets us know that there's a reason he wants that. And there's a motivation there. And the motivation is this, that our sons may be as plants grown up in their youth. That our daughters may be as cornerstones, polished after the similitude of a palace. You know, as we contemplate the problems across the land, we'd make this one observation. Our desire should be that God would intervene, because we want our children to grow up just like this. Plants grown up. One thing I read had the thought of a trained plant, a plant that's trained to go a certain way. Polished cornerstones like a palace. And I believe the comparison was maybe to some of the things that you might find in the temple. We want a good place for children to grow up. We want a good world for them to live in. But you know, we need to be before God that some of this evil and wickedness we see, God would intervene He says that our garners may be full, affording all manner of store, that our sheep may bring forth thousands and 10,000s in our streets, that our oxen may be strong to labor. So he's saying we want an environment where things can prosper, where people can do good and things can move forward. And you know, we think about it, God is the source of our prosperity. Sometimes people think, well, I earned all this, I made all this. God can touch just one or two items, and all of your seeming prosperity would disappear.
That's right.
We need to see it. An example, we think about David, and you know, one of the things that happened, we were looking at, I think it's over in 2 Samuel, but it was dealing with how there came a famine on the land because of I believe it was the Gibeonites, and they had famine for 3 years. And David finally got before God about it, and God said, well, you know, Saul mistreated these people, and it needs to be made right. And so David, we know some of Saul's descendants were put to death to settle the matter. But the thought is, his garners weren't full, his sheep weren't bringing forth well while that famine was going on. And so it is that David's thought was, Lord, rid us of this evil, of this wickedness, so that we'll be in a place to prosper, so that you can bless us. It says that our oxen will be strong to labor, so that we'll be able to, you know, go out there and have what we need to accomplish the work. That there be no breaking in nor going out. And certainly his thought was that with the breaking in, they wouldn't be attacked or they wouldn't be exiled. God could take care of them that way. And he said that there be no complaining in our streets. Now that's, you talk about it, that's something to really desire. God, deliver us from complainers. Rid us of these people, because if you'll deal with this, it will get rid of the complainers. I don't believe God wants us to be a complainer. But he said he didn't want complaining in his streets. He didn't want the people going around, talking about how bad this is and how bad that is. We know that certainly when wickedness is going on, there will be some complaining in the streets. There will be some people saying it's not fair, it's not right, it's not good. There'll be plenty of complaining when wickedness is going on. He says, happy is that people that is in such a case. Yea, happy is that people whose God is the Lord. Now we think about his words here, and one of the observations we'd make is this. Certainly he described the conditions that exist in a good and prosperous nation. Children growing up in a good way, prosperity, success, no complaining. But you know, in verse 15, he says, happy is the people that's in such a case. I believe at times that's what people look on and say, we wish we were in that time. And then he tells us where the answer's at. Yea, happy is that people whose God is the Lord. That's where it's at. That's where it comes from. You know, as people of God, one thing that should be very clear to us, electing this one or that one's not going to achieve that. They all promise that, but whoever we elect is not going to achieve that. The way that is achieved is for God to be Lord of us. When God is Lord of us, then that's achievable. But we need to see, as long as, and I believe David was looking around and he said, we've got some people here that they're strange children whose mouth speaks vanity, and their right hand is the right hand of falsehood. He said, as long as we've got that around the land, we're going to have problems, and we're not going to see our youth growing up as we desire to, and we're not going to be prospering like we'd like to, and our oxen are not going to be able to produce like we'd like for them to. But he said the answer is this: God is Lord. And so as we look at the conditions around our country, we'd make this observation: the real solution to all the stuff that we see going on is a revival in the hearts of men. America will not be great again, regardless of which party has the power, without a spiritual awakening, without a stirring of men's hearts. Certainly, we'd like to see that happy case where the country's prospering and people can find work and they can help one another and things work out good and children grow up and don't end up in drugs and alcohol and going to jail and all of that. We can look at all kinds of things across the land that are bad and wrong, but the reality is, until God is the Lord of us, it's not going to change. That's the reality. Our hearts need to be stirred more than ever. We think about it. We were instructed in the Bible to pray for our leaders, and I don't believe we're instructed to pray for them that their policies would just improve, though we might like to see them improve, and they would improve if they would find God and salvation. Certainly, that's what we're called to pray for, that God would save our leaders. That God saved David, and God chose him, and God made him his own, and he became the Scripture describes him as the apple of God's eye. We know that there was sin there was wickedness there. There was a point at which he had to acknowledge his sin before God, even as the king. But what a difference it would make if leaders around this world would begin to acknowledge their sin, to acknowledge that their heart is wicked and that they are evil and need God as Lord. But you know, as we consider that, we would have to say this as well. A revival in high office alone is not what's needed. A revival at the street level is what's needed. The reality is, many times, the reason we have wicked people in high office is because we have wicked people walking the streets. We have wicked people that will not be happy with a godly man. We think about it, you get out and you try to run for office and you're a godly man, people won't like you because you tell them the truth. Well, the truth is what people need to hear. People don't like it because why? It makes them uncomfortable in their sins. It makes them feel like there's something wrong with me, which there is. Anyone that has not found salvation in Jesus Christ, the best way we can say it is there is something wrong with that person that needs to be corrected. And Jesus shed his blood to correct it. We need to see that if we're going to see a difference, see these kind of good conditions that David described, and certainly the conditions he described would be wonderful in any nation. But it only comes about when God is the Lord of that people. Our hearts need to be stirred to lift up Jesus. Hearts need to be stirred to point people around us to Jesus. We need to be aware that certainly we can go about complaining about it, but complaining don't change it. Very, very seldom does complaining really make much of a difference. But what does make a difference is when people begin to seek God with all their heart for the needs that are so obvious before them. Our hearts need to be stirred that way to pray that there would become a stirring in the hearts of men to seek out God and that which is right. Certainly we'd like to see it on a mass level, but we'd like to see it just our neighbors, people we might interact with. We'd like to see the stirring there. And certainly maybe with our lives, that's where we can only expect God to do it. But we believe that if you'd read the account of places where change has come and it's come in the right direction, it's because the hearts of people became stirred. That we want to see good things. And the way to see them is for God to work in the hearts and minds of men. There's a real need for us to draw closer to God and ourselves, but also to pray that God would begin to move on the hearts of men all around us, that others might be saved. I believe this, you get a town where everyone was saved, that would be a wonderful town to live in. It'd be a wonderful town to live in. Yet I don't believe God wants us to pull off and try to live just off by ourselves, just, have our little compound and get us all in it and try to survive inside a compound where we don't interact with those around us. No, God wants us to be the light of the world. And He doesn't want that light under a bushel. But I believe most of all, we need to cry out to God, just as David did, that God would move across the land. He doesn't have to destroy people to rid the land of them. He could just change them. He don't have to kill people to get rid of the problems. If they'll turn to Him with their heart, the problems would be solved. So we're thankful for God's salvation. May we each one just realize what a wonder it is that God took knowledge of us, that God drew us to Himself, and realize that in our significance, He did that, and that by His grace He can do that for others, just the same as He worked it for us.